You have to know your why. You need to know your why. Positive impact in the world in a significant way. That's what drives me. And that's why I'm here today. Challenges are not rare. They're very common. They're very universal. All of us experience challenges. There is some suffering. There are some adversities. Yet there's a lot of beauty and a lot of love. Challenges is what makes life interesting, and overcoming them is what makes life meaningful.
Hello, and welcome to the Look Up Mindset podcast. I'm your host, author Heidi Siefkas. And in today's episode, we are in season 2 of the Look Up Mindset, and I invited a very special guest, my friend, Dr. Mariana Blumen-Kararsik. Welcome, Dr. Mariana.
Thank you, Heidi. I'm so grateful to be here. How are you?
I'm doing well, and I'm so stoked that you're here. As is normal in this community, we allow our guests to introduce themselves, and I do this for 2 reasons. The first one is selfish, because I get to learn something special about everybody that comes on that I don't necessarily read in their bio. And then 2, it gives me a little bit of forgiveness that I don't need to introduce someone poorly, because I've been introduced poorly quite a few times. So the floor is yours, Dr. Mariana.
Thank you. As you said, Dr. Mariana Blumen-Kararsik, Dr. MBK, board-certified holistic dermatologist, and a co-founder of Precision Skin and Body Institute, which is a comprehensive dermatology center in South Florida. And I'm also a founder, CEO, and creator of Stamina Cosmetics, which is a unique neurocosmetic that I'm happy to share with you.
The most common question that I get is, where do you find your podcast guests? And really, it's the same way that I created my latest book, Look Up Global Stories of Resilience. It's all about connections and timing. So Mariana and I have known each other for almost the last 10 years, and we met basically from 2 interests. We met at a fitness studio in Davie, Florida. It was owned and ran by Ellen Latham, who has now launched a global franchise of Orange Theory. And we were also professional connections in a women's networking group called Suits, Stilettos, and Lipsticks. So we met both personally and professionally. And it just goes to show, life is all about timing and connections. And
absolutely,
I solicited for this season 2 people who had real life hero, badass stories that didn't participate in the book. And she came back with just more than I ever knew about you. And I'm so excited for you to storytell. So now, like any good play or movie, we're going to have to set the scene. And we have to press rewind a bit to probably your childhood and coming to the United States. So could you share a little bit of your backstory of resilience so we can get to the more pivotal moments of more recent?
So yeah, I think my story of resilience starts in my childhood. I grew up in former Soviet Union. I was born in Estonia. I grew up in a Soviet communist society. And it's interesting, yet it's very challenging place to grow up. Even though I grew up with my parents and my brother in a very loving and sheltered home, my parents were educators. They're college professors and engineers. So their academics, education was a strong value growing up. And, it transcended as I was becoming an adult too. But it was also always aware of how the society is very stringent, controlling, access to various, basics was very difficult. Often I remember standing in line for toilet paper and bread for 3 hours after going to school with my mom, and then coming to home and having to do homework and help her cook and all. The day ended very late into the night. And so it was a very difficult place to grow up. With that in mind as a background, in 1980s Cold War era and all the different, ideas of what opportunities there are in America, my parents decided for various reasons, but one of the most important, impactful one was my father was a Jewish descent, Jewish background. So based on the anti-Semitism that he was facing in Soviet Union, which many of Jews were at that time, we decided to immigrate to America as refugees, as Jewish refugees. And with the help of Jewish Federation, we were able to move to Maryland in 1990. So it was, tough being a refugee. You uproot yourself completely from a home, a huge disruption of what your normal routine is. The transition itself, you're kind of lost. You're trying to figure out all the different languages. We went through different countries, Austria and Italy and others. And becoming a teenager at the same time, it's already confusing time. So there were a lot of difficulties happening at the same time, and I was seeing how my parents were coping with it, trying to stay strong and stoic and support them the best I could, by working as a babysitter, and also because I was seeing how hard it was for them, it inspired me to work really hard too. And I quickly caught on to me that when we moved to America, it's important to adapt in order to be accepted, to fit in, to assimilate with friends and culture. And that's when I realized that the best way for me to do that is to meet new people, but also learn as much as I could. So I learned the value of knowledge. So I embraced books. I learned English very well. And I was the main translator for my family. And I devoured books. They were like my rescue from all the craziness that was happening in my life. It was just a lot of change, a lot of disharmony, and yet there was significant amount of hope, and the hope came from the community. So because we didn't have any family members in U.S., there was a Jewish family through Jewish Federation connection that welcomed us and sponsored us for several weeks in their home. They were complete strangers, but they welcomed us and they were able to take care of our family with their kids and their family together in the household until we were able to settle in the United States. They gave us footing and, until my parents were able to have a place of their own and job. So for me, that was eye opening because growing up in such a somber and, scary place like Soviet Union, here I was welcomed by strangers with so much generosity and kindness. So that was my first, I think, belief in goodness of people, the humanity. And I think that stuck with me for the rest of my life. And it probably was the main direction why I went into service care, why I became a physician. Because I understood deep down with all the different aspects and characteristics as human beings, we can be very good and we should take care of each other. So community gave us all hope. And that hope is what I was able to help us adopt as immigrants in the United States. And then the knowledge that I gained was what led me to explore different type of education and eventually come up to understanding that science is what I really love the most. I liked literature, but science was my favorite. So in high school, I did a lot of shadowing in the hospital, volunteering in the hospital. And in the beginning of college, I was an EMT. I worked in ambulances as a rescue. And that was a great immersion into medical world. And that confirmed my passion for medicine. And that's when I found that's my purpose. That's what I'm supposed to do. And I followed that calling and fought for every possible way that I could to get into medical school.
That's two resilient stories right there, or not even life transformation, family transformation. So I guess I'm curious. where did you decide on your path that you were going to choose dermatology?
Right. So that was a very out of the box kind of situation, serendipitous, I should say. During the medical school training, which for me was 4 years, and that's on an average, you get to have the didactic learning for a couple of years, and then you do rotations. Going into medical school because I liked in emergency medicine, and also the potential of being part of the birthing process as a gynecologist, OBGYN. Those are the two careers I was leaning towards. Eh, Yet when I started doing the rotations in in the medical school, I realized those careers will not be my path because of an unfortunate events happening during the rotations. And they were very challenging times to, not only witness as the death of a mother and a child during a rotation, as well as you're learning, as well as, realizing the hectic and extremely chaotic environment of the emergency room, and really lies deep down inside that that's not what speaks to you, even though that's what you hope for initially. So I think for most doctors, we kind of, the destiny as well as intuition guides us toward our field. This team of dermatologists came around to see one of my patients, and the reason why they were called because my patient in hospital had this a very rare rash, and we were clueless at that point, like how to resolve it and what was the cause of it. Was it the medications? Was it something else? So this team with the mentor came in and they started going over all the potential causes of this rash. And for me, it's like I woke up and I was in shock that I did not understand that how many different parts of our bodies and causes that could be causing this rash, that internally your hormonal system or metabolic system could be responsible for this manifestation on the skin. And that's when I realized this is so fascinating. So I started asking all these questions from all the residents. When one of the residents looked at me and said, "You really like this, right?" And I said, "Yeah, this is really interesting. How can you see something on the skin that's going on inside the body?" And he said, "That's often is the story. The skin tells the story what's going on inside the mind as well as the body." He said, "Why don't you come and rotate with us?" And at that point, I said, well, I don't know if they're going to let me. This is a very limited, I'm coming close to graduation, limited time that I have. I said, let's try. And then after I rotated and I saw the versatility of the field, how I could take care of all types of patients, from babies on to geriatric patients, from men and women. And I can have this diagnostic intellectual exploration in my head, as well as the procedures that the dermatology offered. At that time, that's how I navigated toward the field of dermatology and embraced it wholeheartedly and realized this is the career that I wanted. And then I did my research fellowship in it, and that led me to Boston and Harvard. And I did a year of clinical trials, learning all about how to do various, hardcore type of scientific studies in dermatology and apply that to our patients. And then eventually to residency at University of Miami. And once you're in Florida and fall in love with this beautiful sunny climate, we stayed. And after I graduated residency, I became a dermatologist. And that's what I practice now. And I have my own practice decision.
Well, I'm so glad you ended up in Florida because that's where we met. And I spent quite a bit of time there. I so miss the ocean and the warm weather. But where I've ended up is an absolute creative mecca to help me storytell on in various medium. Nashville has been very welcoming and very inspirational. So, like
Wonderful.
I mentioned, we met through personal as well as professional situations. So let's hear a little bit about the personal side of your life after the residency that also showcases how resilient you and your family are. And then we'll get into some of the evolution of your own business.
Yeah, the beautiful aspect of being a physician is that you fall in love with your vocation. You really care deeply about your patients and the difference you're making on a positive difference you're making on a daily life. The challenging part of it is how to fit your personal life into the equation, how to compartmentalize and realize that you matter. So taking the time for your own wellness. And that takes a long time to realize. I think a lot of us are so driven as physicians that we have a hard time disconnecting, realizing that we do need to nourish oneself. And also, connecting with the love of our lives, our partners, and potentially starting our own family. So I was blessed enough to meet my husband toward the end of college, and we dated through medical school. And when I started my residency, that's when we realized, okay, we've been together for a long time. We love each other. It's time to start our marriage and start planning for a family. And so we got married at the end of my internship, and we started thinking about starting the family, soon after the residency. And we said okay. And then, of course, because we waited and we're in our early 30s, that's when biology takes a strange turn and says, "Oh, you may have waited a little too long." And we realized for many reasons we had a very hard time conceiving. So we tried various ways, and eventually that led us to IVF after many, uh, I don't want to say failures, but that's what it led to. And so, unfortunately, we weren't able to conceive. We were lucky enough to conceive with our IVF after only a few trials with our first child, our Lily. She's a teenager right now, and that was phenomenal. And I remember feeling so incredibly grateful after going through the trial IVF. And if anyone is listening right now, I can completely empathize with you how difficult of a path you're going through. It's a very traumatic roller coaster. That's the only way I can explain it. You put so much love and hope and prayers into this process. And it's a roller coaster of emotions and hormones and familial support. And there's so many things going on at the same time. And when it happens, when it does come to fruition, you feel such a high that you can never think that you could be sad again in the whole world. It's such a blessing to have a child and deliver a child and start a family. And so we did. And everybody who told us, including our doctor, said, you know what, once you have one, it's going to be so easy to have others. And we tried and we tried and we tried and we tried. It was many, many, many trials of IVF. And I don't know what my body endured, so many shots and so many hormones and so many hopes and wishes. It really makes you humble. The whole process makes you humble and teaches you endurance, fate in science, because scientifically with each trial you learn a little bit what went wrong and you try to edit it and edit it and edit it. And then also faith in God. This is when I really found my spiritualism. I'm not a very religious person, but I'm a very spiritual person. I in this, finding prayer and trying to connect that with affirmations and that strong belief that something that you wish for so much will come true. And also being very reflective and listening to your body. So to make this long story short, after many trials of trying to conceive second time around, we were ready to give up. We were feeling very blessed with my husband, saying, we have one wonderful child. So, and we're okay with that. So I told my husband, we're going to give it one more try through the specialist that was recommended in New York. And that's it. That's going to be our last, attempt, because that also had another dream right around the same time, another goal, which is with my current business partner, Dr. Leslie Clark Loser, to start our own practice. We were thinking and planning. She had older kids, and at that time, she wanted to consider starting our own practice in order to be the leaders, the captains of our own ship, to have a practice exactly how we envision, to be comprehensive, cutting edge, education forward, personalized type of practice in Davie, Florida. So we were looking at all these different places, and I remember finding the place that seemed to be the right fit for our practice in dermatology. And I remember signing the lease and feeling so excited that for the prospect of the new start. I relaxed. I read a lot of silly novels. I really did a lot of praying and affirmation and mindfulness. I wasn't perfect in my diet. I had a little wine. I indulged in a lot of self care during that time, skincare, happiness. And in the end, what happened is I came home to Florida being pregnant. And, a couple of months later, I found out there were twins. And I told my future business partner, honey, I don't know if I could do this, starting a practice, opening practice, and having twins at the same time. I went through motherhood. Having one was hard enough. And now I have her. She's about 4 and starting practice. And I remember my business partner looked at me and she said, we can do it. We could do it together. And with her support and with this immense community support, my parents came to support me. They moved from Maryland to Florida right around this time. They helped so much because the twins were born, and literally 3 months later, we opened Precision. And that time felt like a hurricane happened. All these things that I wished for, all these things that I dreamed for and prayed for were coming true, but it felt extremely scary. This is the time where, you know, I wanted to be there for my twins that I hoped and prayed for so much, but yet I wanted the practice to flourish, my patients to be taken care of, and the new work staff, family members that were welcome into the practice to be established. So there were so many moving parts. All I could say is that I was very stretched thin, and I felt very, very exhausted at that moment. But somehow, during that time of so many challenges, you find the strength to go on if you just really, really, really realize that this is a time for, for a stronger self, for that resilience that you've been learning all along the way, the adaptability, leaning on the community, the faith and fate, all the different aspects that I've been learning along the way as a child. So this was probably one of the most challenging experiences in my life, the most, that adversity, that first year of, twins and taking care of my daughter and, with my husband being so devoted to her at that time to step in, and so much love and support from, the whole community. That's what helped us thrive through that, first year. And that's why we didn't sink and we swam. And I think that's what makes me resilient now, and allowed me to go through the next adversity, which, I'm sure you can agree was a global societal trauma of COVID.
Yeah,
And yeah, I mean, you tell me how you felt during that time.
I think it's interesting that in my latest book, there were quite a few stories that stemmed from 2020. It was a monumental year for all of us, but it also kind of fueled some brilliant ideas, also some societal evolution. And a lot of people experienced trauma and couldn't process it the same way because we were in a global epidemic. So your background of immigration and medical school, then your personal life, and have it raining and pouring, all good things, was the fuel that got you to be so resilient to then basically shift your mindset on what you saw in your practice in 2020. So could you explain what happened at Precision in 2020 that was like the light bulb moment?
Right. You're absolutely on point to what led to that pivotal moment. And I think a lot of us who experienced COVID feel that we had that kind of pivotal moment through contemplation. The space opened up, that significant anxiety collided, but yet the space of disconnect and calm, that eye of a storm comes over you, and you feel like, you have to make a change. You have to uh, make a contribution in a positive, significant way. At least that's how I felt. The reason why is because I was surrounded by a lot of stress. I was surrounded by a lot of stress, personal, my family. I would, ethically, I felt very torn because it felt like an apocalyptic event, because here I am going to work, and I potentially could be bringing a deathly virus back to my family in the house. So I remember in the beginning wearing these spacesuit like contraptions and masks, and derobing in the garage before coming into the house, and or scrubbing my hands raw because I was terrified. Of what the consequence of, and then more information started coming in, and we were not as fearful, and that anxiety, started to subside. I was seeing significant amount of anxiety in my staff members, whether our practice can sustain, because patients were very scared to come in. So we really had to shorten the work hours, which makes sense, but yet still be there for patients who needed to have skin cancer removals, who had urgent rashes, urgent infections of their skin. So be there, but at the same time, worried about the consequence of how long we could be there, as a practice, as a business, because economically it was very a scary time. And discussing who we had to keep as essential workers and let go some of our loved family members, or at least let them go temporarily. So these kind of decisions were really, really tough. And throw in the spin of motherhood, parenthood, of at home stay, at home schooling. So, with all that difficulty and all that stress, I was seeing the reflection of all the stress, and of course, the economic and political upheaval that was happening in across the world. The consequence of that on my patients. And what I noticed is this pattern of significant amount of psychological stress reflecting on their skin. And I just remember seeing acne, rosacea, eczema flaring out aberrantly, like out of control, randomly. And it didn't make sense. And it was very hard to control with various traditional treatments that we had available. So in my mind, I had to figure out how to resolve this issue. I just kept saying to myself, how do I give it more resilience? How do I give it more stamina to endure through this hard time? The skin stress that translates as a story on the skin that I'm in trouble. Something is beyond the threshold of being able to contain it. So I started doing research, and in my research, I came up two solutions. Number one was integrative medicine. So, integrative medicine was really thought of as a woo-woo medicine or alternative medicine for a while, but right around the time of COVID, this is when some of the early clinical studies confirming the scientific evidence of value of meditation, affirmation, breath work in helping to reduce anxiety and stress and depression. So, pivotal changes in psychology and how it's in tune with integrative medicine. And then embracing that in my work and helping my patients by explaining, listen, I practice meditation. It doesn't need to be complicated. You can do a guided meditation app like Calm or Headspace. There's so many different venues. You can do box breathing with your kids. Breath work is very healing. And just explaining various things that they can integrate into their life to help to reduce skin stress. And then the number two aspect that I discovered is how to reduce the skin stress is these really unique active ingredients in skincare called adaptogens. So adaptogens are been used in world medicines as botanicals like mushrooms and plants and herbs. You probably heard ashwagandha or curcumin and rhodiola, etc. There's so many different ones. Cordyceps mushrooms. So these are incredible botanical ingredients that help us adapt to stress, especially our skin. They were very popular from 1950s, coming from Soviet Union and Asia as nutraceuticals for performance. But now they're being embraced by dermatology and studied dermatology right around this time. And again, early clinical studies showing their benefits on how to balance the skin, protect balance, and revitalize it. So that's when I had my light bulb moment go off. And I realized, what can I do to help with this skin stress? And that is, as a dermatologist, create a skincare line that could be neurocosmetics. So working with our neurobiology, with our psychology to reconnect the mind skin together in order to help to reverse the skin stress and give the skin more resilience. So I created a skincare line called Stamina Cosmetics, which is devoted to skin resilience, radiance, and wellness through affirmations. Like, this is one of the products. It has a little affirmation because you got that. It's the hero, the stamina mist. And through ingredients like botanicals and others like hypochlorous acid that are adaptogenic. So innovative thought process during this critical time is what led to me feeling that I'm doing meaningful work to improve things for the better.
That is an amazing product launch story. I
Thank
mean,
you.
the name of it and having the affirmations, lovely. And combining science with mindfulness, that's taking medicine to the next level.
Thank you. As it should be.
Yeah,
Wholesome,
as it should
holistic.
be. I mean, the skin is our largest organ. We always hear about how much we need to exercise, but it's now coming to the forefront about how much mindfulness practice we need a week in order to have a baseline. And I talk about that it doesn't need to be that much. It's just, I've heard quotes of like 4 times a week for 12 minutes. That's all you would need to do. Or using some of those apps that you mentioned about, or breathing exercises, just to get us at baseline so that we can take on what the world is presenting on multiple levels. And really, that's the reason why I started the Look Up mantra like 15 years ago, was try to remember a lesson that I learned from my full-blown life catastrophe, because we typically revert to previous tendencies. And I wanted to remember that I really have power to flip the switch in my mind, to be in the moment and find the upside. And I feel like your products embody the Look Up mantra completely, with the affirmation and having a daily practice. Yes, you are doing something to your skin, but you're also doing it to your mind. And so I ask
It's
everybody.
habit stacking. It's
Yeah.
habit stacking. You're combining something that's so very popular nowadays. People like to do skincare on a daily basis. There was a recent survey that was done globally. I think about 65% of individuals do some kind of skincare product daily, especially women. So if you can habit stack a mindful practice together that can enhance self-perception and give mental stamina, now you're actually doing more than just taking care of your skin. It's beyond beauty. It's for skin health as well as mind health.
So when I started the Look Up mantra, it was basically so I didn't forget. And then I shared it with people that read my books or attended talks. Then I said, I'm going to level up and I'm going to tell the Look Up story from other people's perspectives. And that's what the latest book was. And it proved the hypothesis that maybe people don't necessarily say it with the 2 words look up, but they have gone through just trials and tribulations, whether it's immigrating, whether it's escaping war, whether it's ailments or infertility, and they leaned into that power of perspective, mindfulness practice, as well as community. Could you reiterate in your words kind of how you feel your complete story connects to the look up mindset?
I'm so grateful to you, Heidi, for this community. Your look up mantra is incredible inspiration. And that perspective to have that lens through whatever challenges, adversities come through our way is always going to be strengthening. That's the anchor. So whoever joins your community, they can carry with them in their mind and heart, the rest of their body, whenever they're facing a challenge. So the mindful aspect is just constantly being aware that challenges are not rare. They're very common. They're very universal. All of us experience challenges on a different levels, but all of us. And they're temporary. So as long as you're constantly aware mindfully that that is what the truth is. And it's not that our world is all about suffering. There is some suffering. There are some adversities. Yet there's a lot of beauty and a lot of love. So how to look up is to have hope and to have faith during that background, that lens. And that is, by building up the resilience through community support, through family values, and really through your own efforts of discipline, tenaciousness, perseverance, following your purpose. I always, whenever people ask me, how did I get into being, at the place I am now, the entrepreneur, I say, you have to know your why. You need to know your why. And positive impact in the world in a significant way. That's what drives me. And that's why I'm here today. I want to share light, something that can give some kind of inspiration of how to be more resilient to others through the lens of look up.
Well, I want people to be able to connect with you after this podcast. Where can they find Dr. MBK?
They can find me on various social platforms. Derm with Stamina would be the most common one. And then, of course, on LinkedIn at Mariana Blumen-Kararsik. And check out the websites, Precision Skin and Body Institute, as well as Stamina Cosmetics. I'd love to share my favorite resilience quote and mantra.
Absolutely.
So I believe Joshua Marine, I don't know if you know that one, is the one who quoted this one, but challenges is what makes life interesting, and overcoming them is what makes life meaningful. So always keep that in mind. So whenever the difficult times come, I say, this could be interesting as long as I grow from this. And that's how I'm going to be able to overcome it. So I hope others can take a little of that tip to cope and adapt whatever challenges come their way.
That's a fabulous quote. Thank you for sharing.
Of course.
Thank you for coming on the podcast and sharing your multifaceted story. You are a Shiro embodied. And we know that there are some real life Shiros, heroes, and badasses out there listening. Thank you for listening to the Look Up Mindset. As we end every episode, it's with a toast to looking up.
Looking up. Cheers.
Cheers.
Be well, everyone.
If today's story stirred something in you, if it reminded you that looking up is always a choice, I'd love to bring this message to your organization or community. I speak to teams, conferences, and communities on resilience, mindset, and navigating life's unexpected moments. I draw from my own experiences, the global stories in this podcast, and my latest book, Look Up Global Stories of Resilience. If you'd like to explore having me speak at your next event, visit HeidiSiefkas.com/speaking or just reach out directly. If you're enjoying the show, the kindest thing that you can do is share this episode with one person who needs to hear it today. Until next time, here's to looking up.